Welcome back to the Last Days Book Club, where we are reading the book Set on Fire, with permission from the author, Taurus Montgomery, a young and successful SDA pastor with a commitment to serving the youth of this generation. In our last reading, we covered chapter 19, entitled Beyond Beautiful, where we were introduced to Nicole, the woman who was to become Taurus's lifelong partner and loving wife. What a beautiful and inspiring chapter. Taurus, we have learned by now, is a first-class writer and inspirational character, always willing to share the life lessons he has learned with simple eloquence for anyone who takes the time to read this amazing book. But in this chapter, he outdid himself. When he first saw Nicole, he was absolutely smitten by her. She was beautiful in face and body, and as he got to know her, in character and personality as well. But this relationship was not to be like other relationships. Before he ever spoke to her, he was praying and seeking counsel from his good friends. The best advice he got from his married friend, Mr. Roberts, was to wait. And even though that went against everything he had known about relationships to that point, he realized that was great advice. So he learned how to wait and shared with us listeners and readers exactly what waiting on a relationship was all about. To summarize, Taurus shared 5 principles he learned. First, check yourself before you wreck yourself and somebody else. In other words, stop focusing on finding the right mate and focus on yourself becoming the right mate. Second, investigate while you wait. In other words, learn all you can about your prospective mate. Get to see her or him in all types of situations: anger, happy, crisis, etc., and see what her character or his is really like. Third, sex is greater when you are a waiter. In other words, don't have sex before you're married, and it will be greater because that is what God says, regardless to what the world says. Fourth, practice sexual purity. Overcome sexual attractions. Get the victory over pornography, even if you have to seek help. And finally, stay prayed up. Pray with your friends and yourself for God to guide you through all these principles of waiting. After Taurus did this, 11 months after he first laid eyes on her, he was ready to tell her. They were both part of NAPS, and he had gotten to see her in many different situations, and it was clear that she loved God above all things, and he was a priority in her life. She was kind and caring and loving, and to top it all, she was absolutely beautiful in every way. Nonetheless, he was terrified of rejection. And on the day when he finally decided to tell her that he wanted her to be his girlfriend, he almost couldn't do it for fear of her saying no. It was his friend Cisco who had to hype him up in the bathroom at a Walmart in Dallas to go and do the deed. When he finally did summon the courage to talk to her in the Naps van, driving back from the Walmart, he was shocked, elated, and on cloud nine when she not only said yes to him, but revealed that she had been praying about him and consulting with her mom about him and was not sure that he didn't even like her. It was like fireworks went off on the highway in front of them. They were smiling from ear to ear and as happy as two bugs in a rug. Now they had agreed. They prayed to God, asking for guidance, and they set up some boundaries for themselves. They vowed to never even kiss until they were married. And as hard as that was, God helped them to keep that vow. They sought counsel, because in a multitude of counselors there is wisdom. And they served together, which was easy since they were both in Naps. Finally, on March 15th, 2009, almost 3 years after she agreed to be his girl, they got married at Oakwood University Church and are still enjoying one another's love today. Dear friends, please don't forget that you can purchase this book at the author's website, taurusmontgomery.com. That's TAURUSMONTGOMERY, taurusmontgomery.com. And read along with us as we pick up the story today in chapter 20, entitled Learning to Forgive. Forgiveness is not always easy. At times, it feels more painful than the wound we suffered to forgive the one that inflicted it. And yet, there is no peace without forgiveness. Marianne Williamson. During my last year at Oakwood, I was faced with what I consider two of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Have you ever been in a situation where your decision, although you know it's what's best for you, might cause the ones you love to reject you or make you feel like you're doing the wrong thing? The weight of these two decisions I had to make was so heavy that I actually dragged out the process as long as I could. That made it even harder. The first decision had to do with Naps and the mentor who showed me favor and groomed me into becoming a better person and a wiser leader. Naps was the organization that God used to help me see the world while serving the world. Naps was the platform God gave me to develop my speaking abilities, to help motivate and inspire troubled youth. Naps was the group that cultivated my desire to help the poor and needy. It was Naps that God used to give me a global perspective of my responsibility to reach back to my brothers and sisters in Africa. It was Naps that gave a young man from the hood the opportunity to grow, mature, lead, and learn things that he never dreamed or imagined. One of the hardest things for me to ever do was to walk away from Naps, the organization that I loved so much. It was only in retrospect that I understood the reasons why God led me to step away. The first reason was because naps had become my everything. I was a strong, influential leader in naps. The 70-plus members all looked up to me. They respected my leadership and valued my advice. I was the golden boy of naps, as some remarked jokingly. The problem was that I had become more dependent on naps than I was on God. My personal identity, value, and self-worth became tied to the things I was doing rather than the one I was supposed to be doing them for. I received a lot of praise for the good I was doing. Gradually and unknowingly, I had made a god out of service. Be careful not to put anything before God. Nothing. Not even a good thing. As one of my professors used to say, it's a terrible thing to make a good thing the ultimate thing. Another reason why I needed to walk away from naps was because of the height at which I had placed my mentor. He treated me like I was his own son. He affirmed me, encouraged me, showed confidence in me, and I was very appreciative and loyal to him for it all. He was the first coach to give me the green light. But I made the mistake of placing him on a pedestal that I shouldn't have. I began to value his opinions and advice more than any other, including my own. Now, I'm not against having mentors. I once heard someone say that it's okay to be a copycat as long as you copy the right cat. I still have mentors, people who I copy because of the things I appreciate and admire about them. My mentors helped to push me. Dr. Paul helped me see that the sky is the limit with God. The discipline to sit down and write this book was developed while I sat under Dr. Gregory Allen. Constant motivation and perspiration for me to keep writing this book came from Eric Thomas. The belief that I could enjoy and do well pastoring a church came from Dr. James Doggett Sr. I'm making this point because I've come to learn that people need examples and role models. We must be very careful, however, about putting our total trust in another human being. The Bible teaches that it is better to put your trust in God than to place your confidence in anyone else, including great leaders and mentors. Psalms 118 and verse 8. The greatest example and role model is Jesus Christ. You can put him on a pedestal and leave him there. Eventually, I wrote Dr. Paul a very long letter explaining my decision to step away from naps. After he read it, we talked about it, prayed together, and he said he understood. I have learned so much from him, from his failures and successes. To this day, I'm grateful to God for putting him in my life. While walking away from naps was hard, what I had to deal with the following summer was even harder. Normally, every summer of every year of my college experience was spent on a NAPS mission overseas or traveling across the US. It was an automatic thing. My parents always knew I would either be going overseas or to some big city in the US. But this summer was different. No NAPS mission. Now, what was I supposed to do? As the semester came to an end, I realized it was time for me to go home. I hadn't been back to Mobile for the summer for a very long time. I didn't want to go because I knew that if I went, I'd be staying in the big house. I think you know the implications of that by now. But I stayed there anyway. Sometime, a man's got to do what a man's got to do. Everything was cool once I found a job. I worked with a private contractor named Mark. He was a tall, young, country Caucasian guy who had me listening to Taylor Swift and Tim McGraw and other country music artists. That's all he ever listened to on the job. Mark specialized in putting vinyl siding on houses. It was easy work, but it was hot. I was making money, so I wasn't tripping. I was still without a car, so my father was the one taking me to work and picking me up. One particular day, I was driving his car. After work, my Uncle Michael needed me to give him a ride. It was during this ride that he shared something with me that struck a nerve deep within. Taurus, now you know you're my favorite nephew, which I think he says to all his nephews. And I won't tell you nothing that is not within your best interest. That I believed. I didn't know where he was going with this, so I just nodded my head and said, I was talking to your daddy the other day, and he really feels like all hope is gone for him to be able to have a relationship with you. He's proud of you and all the things you've accomplished over these past few years. He's happy about the way he and Powell have been able to better their relationship recently. But he feels like he has no chance with you. He's basically given up. Uncle Michael went on to talk about the things that had happened in the past between my parents. He said that years ago, he tried to tell my dad not to be fussing and fighting my mom, especially in front of us. Apparently, my dad didn't listen. But as he was talking, I was getting mad. All kinds of negative emotions came over me. Anger, bitterness, even thoughts of revenge. Those same feelings I had when I was a kid. I was hot. All I'm saying, nephew, is that you ought to try to have a better relationship with your dad. Spend some time with him before you leave and go back to college. He concluded, you might want to start by forgiving him. I know it'll be hard, but remember that it's the right thing to do. For the next 2 days I went through, there was an inner struggle. I was mad. What the heck did he mean that my dad had given up? I hadn't seen a lick of effort on his part. If anything, He needed to be coming to me to ask me to forgive him, asking Powell to forgive him, asking Mama to forgive him, asking everybody to forgive him. How could I forgive this man for all the stuff he did to my mother and put her through? There was no way in the world that I was going to forgive him for what he did. Then the thought hit me like a ton of bricks. How can you not forgive him if you say that you're a Christian? That is when I felt God start working on me. He was trying to begin the process of helping me develop a better relationship with my Father. It was like I heard God saying to me, Taurus, failure to forgive your father will hinder you from going further. I was speechless after that. I admit that learning to forgive can be difficult. But when I consider the fact that God forgives me over and over again each time I hurt him, who am I to not forgive others when they hurt me? I'm not saying it's easy, but it's the right thing to do. Check out what Jesus said regarding this. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. Matthew 6, verse 14. My 2-day struggle turned into 2 weeks. I could not bring myself to approach my father to tell him that I forgave him. During those 2 weeks of inner turmoil, I realized 2 things. First, I realized why I used to get so emotional when I saw fathers connecting with their children. I remember being in downtown Manhattan one night and seeing a group of 10 to 15 fathers with their sons. It was some type of father-son organization, and they were out together, passing out flyers, encouraging fathers to father their sons. In Dallas, Texas, at an Exxon gas station, I saw a young African-American man pushing a stroller with his son walking next to him. Another child was in the stroller. I got out of the van and approached the guy. Hey brother, I just want to say, keep doing what you're doing. Stay in your kid's life. They need you. I offered to pray with him. He agreed. I placed my hand on his shoulder and I prayed for him and his family. Whether I was watching a movie, TV show, or reading a book that had a powerful display of father-son relationships, it always touched a special place in my heart. Sometimes I was so moved that it brought me to tears. I guess it's what I had been longing for since I was a child. I also realized that I had never really dealt with my anger towards my father. It had been there since I was 8 years old. And even though I had given my life to God, my relationship with my father was still superficial and shallow. The only stuff we talked about was things like who won the game, why the Lakers didn't get Chris Paul, who will win the election. All sports, politics, and small talk here and there. I couldn't look him in his eyes. It was always an awkward feeling being around him. Tension was always in the air, along with a big fat elephant in the room that no one wanted to address. I've noticed that there are many people in our world today that are holding on to their anger and hurt from past events. And it kills the potential of a real relationship with their parent or guardian. Hidden negative emotions can lay dormant for a long time when we stay busy. Children begin by loving their parents. After a time, they judge them. Rarely, if ever, do they forgive them. Oscar Wilde. Maybe a relative molested you when you were young. Maybe someone stole something from you, said something to you, or did you wrong. Whatever it is, and whatever they have done, I encourage you to forgive them. Stop holding on to issues you have with your relatives, because you never know how long they or you will be around. Contact them. Work it out, because it will benefit you as well as them. So, I finally decided that I was going to do this. I was going to tell my father I forgave him. I had prayed and asked God for the strength and willingness to do it. It happened one morning as he was sitting on the edge of his bed, lacing up his shoes. I entered the room and said, "I need to talk to you for a minute." I sat down on the bed next to him and told him what was on my heart. I just wanted to tell you that I've been angry and mad and hurt for a very long time. It all goes back to the way I saw you treat my mama. I've been harboring these feelings for too long, and I need to let this go. I forgive you. I don't recall everything he said, but I felt released. Forgiveness sets you free. It was an uncomfortable conversation. Nevertheless, we concluded with an exchange of, "I love you." Today, our relationship is much better, but there is still some room to grow. I really love, care for, and appreciate my dad. There are many things he did when I was younger that laid the foundation for the path I'm on today. One of the things he used to do was drive my brothers and I around the suburbs of the wealthy neighborhoods in Mobile to look at nice houses. He'd point out the obvious differences from our side of town. He was trying to get us to dream bigger than our current circumstances. He often took us fishing on Dauphin Island. He took us to our favorite high school's football games. The fact that he lived with us for most of my life was a plus, because so many of my friends in my neighborhood didn't know their fathers. Though I learned a lot about how not to be a father or husband from my dad, I did learn the power of forgiveness. Now that I have the privilege and responsibility of raising sons along with my precious daughter, I aim to be the best father I can be for them. And if you have kids, I encourage you to have that same goal. But I also believe in the village concept. It takes a village to raise a child. So for young men growing up without an active father in their life, I want to be a role model for them as well. When I went to graduate school, there were plenty of young men God brought into my path in a way that I did not expect. The end of chapter 20 of Set on Fire by Taurus, Montgomery.